Episode 61. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, Dogmen. For tonight's show, we're going to welcome Joedy Cook back on. If you'll remember, Joedy joined us for episode 46. Joedy, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for coming back.
Hey, Vic, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm so glad to have the chance to bring you back. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Got a lot of good information, feedback from people from the last show, so I was really happy about that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not surprised. You did such a great job. What have you been up to since that show that we did?
Oh, God. I've done a couple conventions back-to-back for a while. Been working on a new book called Ohio Dogman, Encounters with the Black Dog. It's basically dealing with strictly all Ohio stuff. Got a lot of new information I'm putting in there. I'm taking some of the information I have in my new Dogman book and putting it in there. Another thing I've been working on also is, I think I talked to you about this in the past, about doing some type of Dogman magazine, and I decided to go with a newsletter, a monthly or a bi-monthly newsletter, because I think that would be a lot better to go with, to be full color, a lot of new reports that people are getting, new information, out there about books and movies and things like that, dealing in the subject, interviews, and I think that would be a lot better to do, and I think people, be very interested because it would be a lot cheaper in the long run to do something like that for people. And I think it'd be a good little collector piece too. So that's about it. Just, going on and doing investigations, talking to a lot of people. Actually, I've had MUFON ask me to join because they're starting to get in to a lot of the cryptid stuff, because they're getting a lot of cryptid sightings and things along with their UFO sightings and stuff. So they contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested, and I think we're going to do that. I know it's going to be a lot to do with all the other stuff I do, but I've done a lot of UFO investigations years and years ago, and I think it'd be neat to get a lot more information on Dogman sightings and things like that with MUFON.
It's funny how all this ties together. You wouldn't think at face value, if you're in MUFON and investigating UFO sightings, that you'd wind up with anything to do with cryptid sightings, but if you place yourself out in the middle of nowhere where a lot of these UFO sightings take place in the first place, I guess you are going to rub elbows with strange cryptids from time to time out there.
Right. There's quite a few UFO type sightings where the entities were dogs, some type of canine dog, which I find very interesting. I don't believe that the Dogman itself is a extraterrestrial entity. I think it's a flesh and blood canine type creature on its own. But who's to say that there's not some type of species out there that is canine? Because we know of reptilian type entities in the UFO culture. So why not a dog? Because like you said, there's quite a few sightings that's taken place. There was actually one here in Ohio back in the 70s where the creature was actually, the way the guy described them was more of the 1940s version Wolfman, which I found very interesting. But he said they were very canine looking, but that's how he described them, was they looked more like the Wolfman from the 1940s movie. And this was back in the 70s. So there is a lot of sightings out there that deal with canines. So I think it'd be kind of interesting to look into that, because there's a big connection with the Skinwalker Ranch with MUFON, and they're supposed to have some pretty neat stuff out there.
Neat? I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting to say the least. If I'm out in the middle of nowhere, Joedy, and I see a UFO come down and land, if a dog-manish looking being steps off of the ramp underneath that UFO, that's a little too much, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I would be more afraid I'm going to be eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm lunch and stuff. So
That's not a good scene whatsoever.
no, it's not. It's not. Yeah.
Well, the listeners didn't tune in to hear us talk about UFOs or whatnot, so I
Right.
probably should move on to the
Yep.
topic that they did tune in to hear us talk about. Since that last show, episode 46, you've been investigating some new sightings. Could you tell us about those?
Yeah, there was one sighting in central Ohio where a guy was going to put some trail cams up because up on his property, something was digging in, trying to get into the chicken coop and things like that. So he thought it was more coyote, or something like that, because they've been finding a lot of hybrid type coyotes in Ohio, and these coyotes are hybrid with wolves, and they're pretty big and they're pretty nasty. And so he was putting some trail cams up, and he was walking through this one area, and there was a lot of high grass that was off to his right. And he stopped, and he saw this large black dog laying in the grass. And the dog kind of looked over at him, and he said it stood up and snarled at him. He said this thing was probably about 7 feet. He said it just, how it was standing there, it was like its paws, this front paws, the hands were almost like curled like a fist almost. And I mean, big broad chest and everything. It had a tail, large snout. It had the high ears. The eyes were almost like a blackish red color. And he said it kind of like twisted its head a little bit while it was snarling. He started to back off. And after he said he didn't turn his back to it, but he kind of was backing off. And he said it just ran. I mean, just on 2 legs. Boom. I thought, man, that was awesome. I mean, the way this guy was telling me the story. So he went back, got a gun, and went back out there. He couldn't find anything, but he took pictures of the trail he went down, and he took pictures of where this thing was laying. And you can see where this thing was laying at. So that was a really incredible story. I mean, the guy he's in his early 20s and stuff, and he just couldn't comprehend what he saw. He was more scared and afraid for his family more than he was for his livestock. But he said he's got motion cameras out, not motion cameras, motion lights and things out there. And he said he stays up pretty late at night just watching this area. He says, I haven't said nothing to my wife and kids, but he goes, my wife knows that there's something there, and she hasn't really pressed him on what it is.
He makes a clean break, snatches up a gun, and heads back to that immediate area. I think that had a lot to do with the fact that he was 20 years old than anything. That doesn't sound like the wisest move when you don't know what you're dealing with.
I asked him, I said, well, why'd you go back by yourself with the gun? I wouldn't have done it. So I would have called a couple of my buddies up and we would have went out, because that, to me, that was crazy. He said, the reason why I did that, because my family was going through my head. If I didn't stop this now, this thing may hurt my family. And he said that was my thinking. I was going to kill this thing. I was in protection mode. And I said, I can understand that, but you're still putting yourself at risk going out there. If there was more than one, I asked him, well, what did you take out there? And he had a single barrel shotgun. And I'm like, dude, I mean, but when you're young, and I was sitting there, I could really understand, because when I was his age, I did stupid things like that. I mean, you kind of have no fear. His children was 3, and 7 months. So I can understand him being scared and where he lived, and this thing being that close to his house. I can understand him doing what he did. I could never have done that. I'm older and I'm wiser.
Yeah, like you said, when you're that age, you think you're bulletproof, and also your judgment isn't what it's going to be later on in life, so got to cut the kid a break. But like you said, that was not the smartest
No, it
move.
wasn't the smartest thing. I asked him, did you possibly think it was a dog or a coyote or something like that? Do you think it was standing up on something that made it look like? He said No, this thing stood up. I mean, literally was standing on two legs. And I asked him to describe it from head to toe. He definitely described this thing. It was definitely canine. He said the back legs were definitely like a dog. He described it very much like a husky type dog. This is the thing that got me and when he described, he said the cheeks on this thing were kind of puffed a little bit fur. And the only thing I can think of, and I was going back wondering what he was talking about, and I was looking at some pictures of wolves, and I understood what he was saying, how they have that puffy kind of cheek a little bit, where the hair kind of comes out, where it almost comes out into like a mane, where it starts at the neck. And he was describing it like that. They were kind of puffed out a little bit with the hair. The head was much bigger, he said, than a normal dog. But he said the hands were more like curled up in almost like a fist. So I don't know. It was an odd sighting, and he said this thing was big. He said it was solid black, very broad chest, very broad at the shoulders and stuff. But he said it was definitely 100% dog looking.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty typical Dogman description. Did he ever mention anything about outward aggression that it displayed towards him?
Only thing he said was that it snarled at him. It showed his teeth. At one point, it cocked its head a little bit as he was doing it. But like you said, he was backing up the whole time. And I remember asking him, well, tell me a little bit more about the head. What was the head doing? He said, well, as I'm looking at it, as it's looking at me, the head kind of cocks to the left and comes outwards, like it's sticking its head out, snarling. That's odd. I said, what about, is there any other details that you noticed about the head? He said, no, that's really about it. And I, from my impression, I mean, with like my dog, who's a German Shepherd, when he shows aggression, his ears normally go back a little bit. And I didn't ask him about the ears. I figured I was wanting him to tell me. So I didn't say anything, but I really wanted to say, well, what about the ears? What about the ears? Because I figure if the ears changed or anything like that, he would have said something. So, like I said, that's a very interesting. I mean, the guy was pretty shaken up. I mean, he went through cigarette after cigarette after cigarette after cigarette through the interview. I mean, boom, one right after another. I mean, he was shaking when he was. This is one of your roebuck country boys. I mean, this dude, this kid was bigger than me. The ones that kind of like lift tractor motors and stuff. You know what I'm saying? The big old country boys, and it scared him. It really did, because he's never seen anything like that. Never. And one thing I thought, well, maybe a bear. There is black bear up there, and I think everybody is smart enough to know a difference between a bear and a dog. That's the thing. When you're that close to it, the difference between a bear and a dog.
Especially someone like him who's spent all of his life out there.
Yeah, well, he's never seen a bear out there, because we talked about that, and he said, no, we haven't found any, I've never seen one. I've never seen the evidence of any bears. But the thing of it is, it's just, I'm just saying in general, most people know what a bear looks like, and they know what a dog looks like. It's the whole thing, the werewolf phenomenon. When you see something, you can recognize it. Even though you recognize it from movies, you recognize it from books. You're able to recognize it and identify it to what it is. And that thing that really reeks me about science, it's misidentification. No, because people can tell the difference. Because it's stuff like that so much in our culture that, when we see something, we can identify it what it is. So if it looks like a werewolf, it looks like a werewolf. It doesn't look like a bear, because we know what a bear looks like. Because we can comprehend that. But, that was one of the best sightings I had. There was another sighting in Germantown where a guy was going down the road, and he seen what he thought was a bear in this field. And so he goes to stop, and he's looking at this thing, and he's like, I'm amazed, man. I've never seen a bear before in my life other than a zoo, and he said this thing just starts gallivanting a little bit, and he sees it has a long tail, and he's like, man, that's a large coyote. He said this thing is big, and he's watching this thing, and he says it's chasing something, a small rodent in this field, and he said he ends up getting it, and he said this thing, it's like he takes its hands. He said the front paws, and he's holding this thing while he's eating it. It's something unique to him, but he, that's what he was saying. That it was holding it and eating it. He realized after a point it wasn't a bear, because when it was sitting there at first, that's what he thought it was. But like you said, when it, started galloping off towards something, he was able to see the tail. And he knew it wasn't a bear. At that point, he thought it was a very large coyote. And then when it got what it's got, it's sitting there, and it's holding this and eating this thing. And he's sitting there watching this thing, and then he says it just kind of goes off. And I'm like, dude, why didn't you take a picture of it? You got a cell phone. Why did you not take a picture of this thing? And I was just in awe. He goes, I didn't even think about it. He said, this thing could have came up to me and ate me. And it was that much in awe just watching it. And I'm saying, well, how far was this thing from you? He estimated about 70, maybe 75 yards away.
That's still pretty close.
It's pretty close. I went to the location. I was at the site where he sat at, and it was close enough that you could identify what it is. And this thing, if it took a running charge to you, I think by the time you realized what was going on and got moving, I think it could have been up on you. And I can understand his point, what he was saying. But my thing is, I keep my cell phone always at camera mode whenever I'm on, in my car, because God knows what happens. I believe the guy. My thing is, dude, you had a camera. I would have been snapping pictures. But I guess everybody is different. When everybody sees something, and I can understand him too, because I've seen things where you just don't want to take your eyes off of it, because you want to try and get a better understanding of what you're looking at. And if you're afraid if you move to grab your phone or grab something, the thing's gone. And that I can understand. But I thought that was a very interesting sighting. Not as good as the first one, but that one I thought was pretty good. Because I know in that particular area there is a lot of Dogman sightings up there. Adam Davies, Adam did a Google Earth image of an area and got something on that in that same field, which I thought was really interesting, of a large, dark creature 2 feet walking in this field. This thing's huge. It doesn't mean it's a Dogman, but it's in this particular area where they've been a lot of sightings where actually I've gotten tracks out of, and Adam has gotten tracks and stuff out of that same area. It's real close where a lot of the kill sites are taking place. But what's so interesting now is that the DNR is I can't say confiscating, it's not the right word, but they're privatizing a lot of the land up in this area where the sightings are taking place. And they just recently done that. And, I find that very odd. And there's a lot of signs that they're posting up in that area, telling you can't go in there because it's a controlled area. And like I said, they're doing this in a lot of the areas where there's a lot of sightings taking place. And like I said, this is just recently, within the past couple months, they've started to do this.
The more I find out about that Germantown, Ohio area, the more strange it seems. It seems like there must be a big population of dogmen around there because of all of the sightings that take place around there.
It's not that big. That's the thing. But the thing about the area itself, the town is not that big, but it's a lot of rural and wooded area around there. But there's something about this particular town where a lot of the sightings are taking place. Now, my third one that I got out of there was, it wasn't so much of a sighting, but it was a vocalization that they got. Like there was a guy out there sitting on his porch. He said he was able to hear something, moving the wood line by his house. He thought, well, a deer, because deers come out of the wood line, they go into his yard. He has a feeder there. And he said that he was hearing a growling sound and a howling sound. He said literally like a wolf howl coming from the wood line. And he said it was at one point that the growl was so loud, he said, I felt the vibration in my chest. And he says, I'm 30 yards from my porch to the wood line. And 30 yards is not far. Okay, but he has a big property. Okay, but particularly where he was at was closer to the wood line. And he said it was that loud, literally, he felt the vibration in his chest. Yeah, so, and he said it was definitely, and this is in Germantown also, and he's very aware of the stuff that takes place, in Germantown. And he said this was not the first time I've ever heard it. And actually, what's interesting is that it's the father of a guy who was at a conference that I was at, that I know very well, who lived in Germantown. And we started talking about it, and he goes, you need to talk to my dad. My dad can tell you some really interesting stuff about up there. And he goes, I want to take you out to an area up there that, the DNR has actually been trying to, intimate domain is what he was saying on this particular piece of area. And he says, this is where this thing is. He goes, I'm telling you, this is where this thing is. He says, because I know it's there because the DNR is pressing to try and get the land. And he said, there's nothing in this area worth having. I mean, meaning that there's no wild grass that's protected under law. There's no particular tree or owl or bees or whatever. You know what I'm saying? That the DNR would want protected. It's just a bunch of dead area, but they want it protected. And he said they've been fighting with the town to get this area protected. And he said a lot of that stuff's going on up there in Germantown, and it's a really odd place because everybody who you talk to from that area or who's from Dayton or Middletown, when you talk about the Germantown werewolf, everybody knows it. They got a story. They know somebody that saw something, or they heard something, or they seen something. Everybody knows something about that, except for the officials.
Is that what the locals refer to it as, the Germantown werewolf?
The Germantown werewolf, yeah. And here's the neat thing about it. The Dayton Daily News did about 4 articles on the Germantown werewolf. And as of today, you can look through all their archives going back 30 years, and you will not find one of those articles.
Really?
Yeah. I thought that was odd. Not even in microfiche, you cannot find those articles. Adam, I believe, has 4 articles that they did, but he and I talk a lot, and we talked about this. You can't even go up there and look for them anymore. You can't find them. They're just not there. I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't believe in a lot of stuff out of the ordinary, but if there's something that could be a possible threat to a community, I can see the law enforcement or the DNR kind of covering up, for the fact is they just don't know how to deal with it. And I know for a fact they're monitoring it. I know for a fact they are. I've talked to people that have seen them on their property. There was the one case I was telling you about in Riley Township about the horses that were killed, and the other ones that were attacked in the sheep. The DNR is still on this guy's property with weapons, looking for something. And they're saying, oh, it's devil worshiping. No, it's not devil worshiping. because the DNR would not be getting involved and looking for devil worshippers. So I know there's something that they know that they're not saying because of the simple fact is they don't know how to deal with it yet. And when they're able to deal with it and get their hands on it, then maybe something may come about. But there again, the normal person, you talk about werewolves, they want to sit there and laugh, and that's what they want. They want people that's going to sit there and discount it, laugh at you, and things like that. Because as long as you got people thinking that you're a nut, they're protected. Until something happens, until someone was killed. It's okay with livestock being killed, small animals and things like that, because they can sit there and say, oh, that's bear and all that other stuff. It's the same thing that would happen in Defiance, Ohio in 1972. They said it was a bear, and there was physical proof that bears were not in Ohio until 1980. Okay? And the DNR was the one that actually put that information out, that bears didn't start populating in the state of Ohio until 1980. Now, yes, in some of the bordering counties along Pennsylvania and West Virginia, yeah, they were bear sightings prior to 1980 because they were migrating from Pennsylvania to West Virginia. But since we have a large abundance of roadkill in deer population, the bears stayed because the food source is here. The food source is not worth them going back to Pennsylvania or back down to West Virginia. They stayed here. But the majority of the population of the bears are on the east side of the state. Now, yes, we've had sightings some on the west side of, a rogue bear going off on his own. But 1972, there were no bears. But they were first thing saying, this thing that was killing the pigs and killing the cows, oh, it was a bear. It was a bear. Because they wanted to sit there and to calm the people down. But when I talked to the chief's wife after his passing, she knew exactly what was going on. They knew that this was a flesh and blood entity that was doing this. But they had to sit there and come up with a story to protect the people of the town so they're not going out with a bunch of guns and somebody getting hurt.
By doing that, by making the whole topic a laughing stock, what happens to the eyewitness when someone unfortunately does see one of these things and then they come back home and try to reach out to their family members for help and they get laughed at? Yeah, that's what drives me nuts about this whole thing. I hate that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's true because I've talked to so many people. Like some of the stories I've got in my book, some of these people are in very high profile positions and they have no one to talk to because if the story got out, their job's in jeopardy. And there was one woman that I talked to and I interviewed and I have the story in my book. She was afraid to tell her family, tell her husband, tell her, her family about being laughed at of what she's seen. But the thing of it is, here's my thing. I could sit there in a crowd of people say, I search for Dogman, blah, 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 Bigfoot or whatever, and they may sit there and laugh and giggle, but I'm telling you what, they'll come up to you one-on-one. They're going to tell you their story or a story they knew about somebody or their father or their mother or something like that. Then they have no problem talking to you when they're one-on-one, when they're away from the crowd, and that's normally how it is. But this phenomenon is getting so big, it's like I said in the past, this is the new cryptid. This thing's getting bigger than Bigfoot. And a lot of the sightings people are getting are very credible sightings. And the thing of it is, this is aggressive. This thing shows aggressiveness towards you. Luckily no one has been killed or attacked. But just recently, I saw something posted on Facebook, an article about a guy that got attacked by a large creature, and he had scratch marks. They showed the scratch marks on this guy's face and on his body, and I believe that was the Dogman that this guy was encountered with. I mean, here in Ohio, not Ohio, but Wisconsin, rather. You look at some of the stories that are coming out there with these people being that close to some of these things. They're getting contact. I mean, the London, Ohio case. This thing was at the house, these people's house, trying to get into a kitchen window. So. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be time, but like you said, we don't know if anyone has actually ever been attacked, and if they were, would it be covered up? Yeah, I think it would be. If they want the information covered up, they'll cover it up. They'll keep it quiet.
You know what, Joedy? It's funny you mention that because I actually know of two people who have, in fact, been attacked by one of these things. They were not doing anything to provoke that attack. That's what's the most disconcerting aspect of the whole thing. If they had done something to provoke the dogman that attacked them, that would be one thing. The fact that they were minding their own business, didn't even know the dogman was there until the moment it made contact and initiated that attack. That, for me, is what's so disconcerting about this whole thing.
You know, my wife said, if you're out in the field by yourself, which one would you want to be attacked by, Bigfoot or Dogman? I'm like, Bigfoot. Seriously, because I have a 5-month-old German Shepherd. Okay, he's already 80 pounds at 5 months. Okay, and he's able to knock me down playing. I can just imagine that something 7 feet, 300 pounds, like my dog, what it could do to me. Knowing what my dog, when we play, he bites. He doesn't bite hard to hurt me, but he bites enough that you feel it. And I can imagine, what one of these things could actually do to you. I hate the fact one being killed to prove the existence, but something's going to happen because I know law enforcement knows about it. I know the DNR knows about it. I know the government knows about it. And I think that they find, especially the DNR, finds that this thing is probably more of a threat than a Bigfoot is.
It's funny you mention that, Joedy, because if you think about it, I'm sure for years there's been some type of high-ranking official with the DNR, whatever type of government agency that handles issues like this, who has been worrying about trying to discredit Bigfoot sightings, and then all of a sudden these dogman encounters started coming by the way. Can you imagine how much more worried that official is going to be about squashing dogman encounters than they ever were about trying to squash the Bigfoot phenomenon?
Well, and that's true because if you look at different states, Wisconsin, their DNR people out there have files with werewolf written on it. You take the state of Maine. The state of Maine even outlawed silver bullets on the protection of werewolves. Now, was that to be funny, or was that for a particular reason? And I find that interesting, that the state of Maine, that their DNR actually did that. And it's even on their, I believe it's still on their website where they talk about it. But that's odd. Okay, you sit there and think about it. In Ohio, I've written under the Freedom of Information Act about Bigfoot, and they came back and said, "Oh, we have nothing. We don't have one file on Bigfoot." That's bullcrap. Okay, that's bullcrap. At least when I wrote the FBI, I got 28 documents of blacked out pages, and then they sit and tell me there's 2,000 plus documents that's classified. Okay, well, that's my next stop is to write the FBI under the Freedom of Information Act about Dogman. And I just recently, about 3 weeks ago, I wrote a letter to the ODNR on Freedom of Information Act on sightings on the Dogman in Ohio. And, so I kind of got creative because I know how the government works. So I said Dogman, werewolf, wolfman, large bipedal canine, large canine walking on 2 legs, large wolf-like man creature. I just went through like a whole different spill of different type of narratives. A week later, they sent me a letter saying, "Thank you for your request. It's being searched through. You'll get it at an appropriate time that's allowed." And then a week later, I get a letter saying, "Your request is denied." Denied. You can't deny a Freedom of Information request unless it's stamped classified. And that was it. I'm like, are you serious? Denied? So I'm in the process of writing a letter back saying, under the law, unless it's stamped classified, you can't deny giving me the request.
If they do cave and send you information like that, if it's something to do with Dogman or Bigfoot, you're just going to get redacted out information. You might find 2-3 words on each page if you're lucky, but they still are in total control.
Right. Well, it's like what the FBI did. The FBI sent me, like, newspaper clippings. They sent me a test result on hair samples that they did. And they sent me other people that filed requests. I mean, just sent me like 28 pages of nonsense. But here's the interesting thing about this. Each file is called a serial, like serial 1, serial 2, serial 3, all the way up to serial 10. So they sent me serial 1 through 10. But then they said serial 4 missing. Okay? And so when I wrote them back saying, well, how can serial 4 be missing? He said, well, when someone got into the files and was sterilizing the files, they probably erased the files. Well, this is a government file. Nobody's investigating why it's missing. So that tells me serial number 4 had all the information in it. And stuff. So, it comes back to the DNR. Either they've got, I even put Black Dog down because here's the thing. I know people from the DNR, okay, and they specifically told me that their code word for the Dogman is Black Dog. And they got that information from the U.S. Forestry Service because that's what they use. So all departments and agencies are using the same code word. It's the same thing with law enforcement. All law enforcement across the country, along with the DNRs of each state, have a code word for Bigfoot, and it's called Black Cow. Okay, and that has been confirmed by a lot of law enforcement officers from across the country. There's a book out called The Black Cow, and it deals with law enforcement sightings on Bigfoot when they get a report and they go and they check it out and they call it in and they do their file work and everything and they stamp it as Black Cow. So I know the DNR has it and there is the Black Dog. So there's something more to it. For them to say we're just going to deny your request, no, you can't just deny my request. It's law. That's why Freedom of Information Act is there, for you to give me what I requested, unless, like I said, it's stamped classified. So either it is stamped classified or they just feel they're not going to cooperate. So that tells me that the ODNR has information on Dogman and they're keeping it quiet.
That says everything about how common these encounters are. If these agencies have a moniker like Black Dog for Dogman sightings, that tells you all you need to know about how often people are reporting these sightings into them.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Like you said, every state knows about this. Those guys, the DNR in Maine, they all have files. Werewolf. And they put all their information in there. But, the thing of it is I don't want to get to the point where I'm teeing off someone because I got to a point where I really made the FBI upset, where they basically told me to back off with the Bigfoot stuff. When the FBI tells you to back off, you back off. The DNR, they're a government agency. I'll go to a point where I'm not going to be majorly pushing, but I'm going to use my right as a citizen under the Constitution, getting the information that I need.
Yeah, if the FBI tells you to back off, it is a good idea to comply. I can't say
because they can make your life very miserable.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tell you how they did it, okay? This was when I was single. I wrote this Freedom of Information Act. My phone bill was real high, okay? And I was disputing it because I wasn't home when these calls were made. They're not right. I tried calling the numbers, and they're disconnected numbers, so why am I being charged for this? And I got into a fight with the phone company, and I refused to pay my bill. I was standing my ground. I refused to pay my bill. So they cut my phone off. So I'm like, I don't care. My phone was off for about 3 days, and I get a call. My phone rings at 2:30 in the morning, literally at 2:30 in the morning, and it's the FBI. I'm talking to the guy. He was getting real aggressive at first, and then he gets real nice, and he goes, well, I'm going to tell you how to do it right, okay? And he says, this is the way you need to do it. And that was it, and my phone's dead again. True story. Swear to God. Okay? That is how it happened. That freaked me out so bad. Literally so bad. And the guy's name was Gary Hart. Okay? And the only Gary Hart I knew at the time was the Gary Hart running for president. So that tells you how long ago this was. But I thought that was really odd. But seriously, no kidding, my phone rings at 2:30 in the morning. It was 1:30 or 2:30, something like that, in the morning. And my phone was cut off. And my phone was still cut off for like a couple of days after that. And I'd say, well, hey, I'm going to pay my bill. Day one, I'll pay my bill. Because that really freaked me out. It truly did. Truly did.
Yeah, I can't say I'll blame you there. Did you tell old Gary that he wasn't going to be getting your vote?
No, I was scared, man. I swear I was looking out the window. He kind of went like you said, went in and said, if you're going to write under the Freedom of Information Act about something, this is the way you need to do it. This is what you need to say, blah, 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 blah. But I never did anything after that. That was it. But he was telling me the proper way of doing it without pissing people off. Excuse my French. But I know it's a far-fetched story, but I'm telling you, it's 100% true. It's 100% true.
That would get your attention.
It got my attention. Like I said, I've never written them under the Freedom of Information Act again for anything. I'm contemplating if I'm going to do it on Dogman or not. Because I'm sure I'm on some list when they get it, bells are going off and, stuff,
And you know what? I'm sure old Gary has got you on speed dial, so yeah, be careful.
I'm sure he's been monitoring my calls and internet and all that other stuff,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing of it is, a friend of mine, who I did UFO investigating with, this is kind of funny. I got to tell you this, but he's a spook now. Okay. And he does a lot with the CIA and stuff and things, and he won't tell you jack. I mean, he literally won't tell you jack. But this guy was like really into the UFO stuff and really into freedom of information and all this stuff. But he was just a computer whiz, and they just hired his butt because he was knowledgeable. And he said, I would tell you something. The government don't kill people anymore. He goes, they'll ruin your reputation. That's how they get you. Humiliation is worse than death.
With all their resources, it's so easy for them to do that too.
Oh yeah. It is. He says they can make you out to be a child predator. They can make you out to be a person wanting to take out an official. They can make you out to whatever they want, and they can make up all the information they need, and they're not going to be one person that's going to dispute it.
Yeah, that's true.
He said you'd be surprised if they wanted to discredit you, they would. But on the other hand, guys like me and guys like you, it's better to give us this information and spread that than it is to shut us up. So it's an odd world we live in and stuff. So I'm to the point. I really don't want to tee off any government agency. I mean, I've talked to people about certain things. I've got some very interesting stuff I know is true that I've never told anybody, and I'll probably never tell anybody until I can actually back it up and things. I've seen pictures of things and so forth, but you can't verify if it's real. When you get a picture sent to you that is so incredible, you're afraid to post it because you just don't know. I mean, I've had recently and in the past, out of nowhere, photographs of odd things being sent to me. People saying, well, this is what it is, do with it what you want. When they tell you to do with it what you want, that is the part that gets me. Some of it is Dogman related, but like I said, I won't post it. I won't put in anything because I need verification. And when people are not emailing you back and all of a sudden the email comes back undeliverable, that makes you think, am I going to get into something here? I mean, because people can Photoshop some very crazy stuff. So you got to kind of like watch what you do there. You really have to watch what information you put out.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. After some of the videos and photos and recordings that I've received and continue to receive, yeah, you've got to kind of walk on eggshells and handle it very carefully.
Yeah, because there's trolls out there that will deliberately make you look bad. Seriously, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, and you got to be careful. I always tell this to people. I don't care how sincere your witness is. I don't care if he cries in front of you or what. You always have to be cautious. There's that saying, don't bullcrap a bullcrap artist. Anybody can fool you at any time. We see it on the news every day with a bunch of false flag stuff. We see it, and it's thrown in our face, so it can be done, and it's the same thing with witnesses. You just don't know. Yeah, you can sit there and say, yes, it's credible, I believe them. Nothing's wrong with that. But you still have to verify and check it and verify it again.
Before we get too much later into this interview here, Joedy, I know you're running short on time here. I'm sure there are a lot of listeners out there who heard you allude to that London, Ohio incident where the Dogman was trying to get through that kitchen window.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people listening to the show heard that, but they're not all that knowledgeable about what happened. Could you fill us in on that?
Oh, wow. There was a family in London, Ohio, back in, I'm going to say probably 82, between 81 and 82. It was Keith and Diane Williams was the family name. They lived in a property up in London, Ohio, that was pretty much out there, kind of like how the property was in Paranormal Witness, the Wolf Pack. It was the incident was very similar to that. And what's kind of neat about that, when people see that incident on Paranormal Witness about the Wolf Pack, they get that confused with the London, Ohio case. And even if you look it up on the internet, you'll notice that there's a lot of confusion because it was a very similar type case. The husband was gone, the wife was home with their children, and she's at the sink doing dishes, and she sees this large canine with piercing eyes looking into the window. And, you know, the window was probably about 7 or 8 feet off of the ground, and this thing was at eye level to her. And it was trying to get into the house, it was trying to get in through the door, trying to get in through the window. She's terrified. She's terrified for her children. But luckily it did not get into the house. You know, when she first saw it, she thought it might have been a stray dog, you know, or something. But then she realized, well, this thing is standing on 2 legs looking directly at her. Like I said, it was about 7 or 8 feet from the outside the window to where the sink was. So it was a very terrifying story. It actually made the newspaper, actually made the news. They moved immediately from there because they have had quite a few incidents at that property. The husband kept always saying it was a stray dog. It was a stray dog trying to get in. It's not no monster and stuff. She said, I mean, this thing had dark, piercing eyes. When it was looking at her, it was snarling at her. She was terrified. She knew exactly what it was. I mean, this thing was trying to turn the doorknob. So it had possibly human-style hands trying to get in. She saw it very clearly, what it was. So,
can you imagine what it must have been like for her?
Oh, I can imagine. Very terrifying. Very terrifying. It goes back to that whole thing. That is I think the nightmare of everyone is that creature. I'm 52, 20 years in the Army. I've been in combat in Iraq. And I can watch something dealing with the Dogman, and I can go outside, take the garbage out, and I still kind of get, you know, because this thing can get you. It can actually hold on to you. You know, it's got, you know, this thing probably has hands like a raccoon, and it's able to get a hold of you. And that's what's terrifying, because this is something that can hurt you, do some serious damage to you.
Yeah, just imagine that. For anyone who's been bitten by a large dog, think about what it would be like to have something like that grab onto you with those big clawed fingers, having it start biting you. That would just be absolutely horrible.
What's even worse, that if it didn't kill you when it bit you, that just the bacteria into your bloodstream, because you don't know what type of animal this is, if it has rabies or distempered or what, just the bacteria that it gets from eating other animals, especially if it's eating roadkill, the bacteria just getting in your body would be enough to kill you. That's the terrifying part, I think, because that's what you have to deal with. I mean, it's like anybody will tell you, like, a human bite's worse than a dog bite. But, an animal like that, and, the amount of bacteria that it's in contact with is frightening alone.
Well, I know you've got to run, Joedy. I can't thank you enough for coming back on.
Anytime, buddy. Anytime.
I really do appreciate it. Well, yeah, thanks again so much. I really appreciate it, and you have yourself a great night.
All right, buddy. You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.